Hey, this week we're looking at what Jesus was teaching us. In Matthew 6, by the way, is where we look at this prayer. He's teaching us what we need to reflect in our conversation with our Father when we pray. And this morning we're looking at this phrase, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. And today I want to remind you that Jesus teaches us to pray for guidance, which we started talking about yesterday, because only God can enable me to overcome temptation. That's really part of what that's all about. He can deliver us. Yesterday we saw that we asked for guidance to avoid temptation. And again, it's important that we realize temptation is not sin, but it can lead to sin. Yesterday was about recognizing the temptation and avoiding it. But what if we don't avoid it? What if we run right into it? Paul would write to the church in Corinth about that in chapter 10. He said, the temptations in your life are no different from what others experience. So just a reminder, none of us can say, but no one understands my temptations. Au contraire, there are other people in the world, maybe in our nation, maybe in our state, maybe in our city, where you go to work or to school, maybe in your own home, who face the same temptations you do. But you may not know it because that's not typically part of our daily conversation, right? Paul continues, and God is faithful. He will not allow you to be tempted more than you can stand. Isn't that interesting? God knows our limits, and whatever temptation we face is not more than we can overcome. So Paul says, when you are tempted, God will show you a way out so that you can endure. And that's huge. Yesterday, I started to show you something that Jesus' brother James wrote toward the end of the New Testament in the book of James, chapter 1. And we read this, when tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. So just a reminder, God doesn't tempt people. He loves you. He wants what's best for you. But you do have an enemy who loves tempting you because he hates you and he wants to destroy you. And I told you this yesterday, but I'm going to say it again. God doesn't hate you. The devil doesn't love you. So why does Jesus pray, lead us not into temptation? Look at what his brother says. Verse 14. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Your temptation, my temptation, listen, they may not be the same things. Your evil desires, my evil desires may be different, but make no mistake, we both have them, and both of us are tempted. Verse 15 then says, then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it's full grown, gives birth to death. Temptation is anything that distracts us from the will of God. The word sin literally means to miss the mark of perfection. So when we're being tempted, we're faced with a thought or an attitude or a behavior that would cause us to miss God's mark of perfection if we indulged in it. So verse 15 one more time. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. I want to make sure you caught that. Man, it's serious stuff. That's why Jesus shows us that this needs to be part of our prayers every day. So let me remind you again of what Paul wrote to people just like you and me. He said in 1 Corinthians 10, the temptations in your life are no different from what others experience. And God is faithful. He will not allow the temptation to be more than you can stand. And when you're tempted, he will show you a way out so that you can endure. Listen, with God's help, we can overcome temptation. However, he won't do the work without us. That's why we ask for him to help us overcome temptation. And if you haven't done that yet today, now's a good time to stop. Think back through today already. Think about what's next. Think about what's later. He may be providing a way out right now if you recognize it, and just ask for his help in advance.